Hello, my name's James and I've been bike fitting for over 13 years. One of the most common ailments that I've experienced from people coming through our studio is numb hands. What are the causes? What are the remedies? Stay tuned to find out. Almost lost a testicle then. Right. Reason number one, your handlebars are too wide. One of the most common compensations for excessive handlebar width is for a rider to roll their wrists. And what this tends to result in is excessive pressure on the ulnar nerve as one of the primary nerves that lead to the hand, and that in turn will create numbness. It's commonplace for off-the-peg bikes to possess handlebars that are too wide. Most men measure in their shoulder width between 39 and 41 centimeters, rendering a 42 centimeter too wide. Just for context, a 42 centimeter handlebar is probably the most common handlebar width that you'll see on like a 52, 54 and 56 centimeter bike. I myself moved from a 42 to a 40 about a decade ago, and my neck and shoulder issues as well as my hand issues disappeared overnight. As a side note, other issues associated with excessive bar width are an inability to reach the brake levers, as well as the fact all the issues you're getting with your hands will probably refer up into your neck and shoulders as well. Reason number two. Excessive reach. Now, this comes about because of the way we would like our bikes to look. Long stem, no spacers. Modern road bike cyclists are all kind of wannabe contortionists. You do not want to be doing a plank and riding a bicycle at the same time, because what it will generally result in is excessive weight on the hands. Cue a cut-off of circulation to those hands, and you will get numbness as a result. If you're getting numb hands, you've got a 140mm stem on the bike, it might be worth having a go at knocking it down a touch. I've got to get off this. Excessive reach is the second biggest contributor to pain in cycling, slightly after excessive saddle height, and we see it in pretty much every fit. I would say 9 times out of 10. It tends to also create ramifications in the saddle as well. A little hint. If your bike feels a little bit too long, it's way too long. On the grounds that, as a human being, we were extremely good at absorbing dysfunction. So with regards to reach, what happens is we absorb. Now it feels too long. By the time it's entered your psyche, it's way too late. If you feel you need to drop your reach down by 10mm, have a go at dropping it by 20. Reason number three, excessive saddle tilt. We have the idiots of British cycling to thank for this. It's very commonly recommended that if you get saddle issues that you should drop the nose of the saddle as a means of alleviating soft tissue pressure. Well, there's a problem with this. When you drop the nose of the saddle, you create a slope. And what happens when we put something on a slope? Yeah, we're talking about the ever-present force that is gravity. When you drop the nose of the saddle excessively, it basically throws you into the front of the bicycle. Not only is this going to cause you numb hands because you're going to end up with loads of weight on the front of the bike, it's also going to negatively impact the way the bike rides. That high-speed skittishness that you might experience at high speed could almost exclusively be attributed to the tilt of your saddle. So try and keep them more or less level. If that causes you saddle issues, it's probably not the saddle tilt, it's probably not the saddle, it's probably saddle's too high, or 1,000,001 other reasons. Either way, don't do it. Okay, now I can't get down. Reason number four, your saddle's too high. Many of you are going to roll your eyes at this because you all know that I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about excessive saddle height. When the saddle is too high, it results in typically a postural engagement of the hamstrings and effectively just throws your weight into the front of the bicycle. Saddle height should be based on a rider's ability to kind of pass through the bottom of the stroke nice and smoothly. Something to look out for would be a staccato or a choppy pedaling dynamic. You want the pedaling to feel nice and smooth. Excessive saddle height will also typically result in a rider's need to gravitate towards the nose, which in turn is going to destabilize the pelvis because you're not going to have sufficient support from the saddle. And again, cue problems with your hands. Reason number five. Insufficient crank length. Now, since Pikachu started riding 165mm cranks, legions of people have now embarked on crank length reduction. We also have physiotherapists bike fitting to thank for this. Seemingly, there isn't a huge amount of testing that goes on when recommending shorter cranks. Shorter cranks are not always better, and insufficient crank length can typically result in a rider falling into the front of the bike and excessively putting weight through the front of the bicycle. Again, cue numb hands. One other thing to note is that insufficient crank length can also result in excessive weight on the nose of the saddle. It's imperative that if you're going to experiment with short cranks, it's probably best to do it with a system like this, which you can adjust in small increments. We can adjust from 155mm all the way up to 185 in 2.5mm increments. At Bicycle, we experiment with crank length in every Bikefit, but it's usually carried out in an informed manner where the rider is screened before we even start looking at them on the bike. Reason number 6, insufficient stance. When you do what I do, you sort of find yourself obsessing over certain aspects of what you do. At one point in time, many years ago, I used to fit riders with a hell of a lot of setback before I realized that there are other ways of taking weight off of the hands, which is actually what I was trying to achieve. And one way I found of removing weight from the front of the bicycle was to increase the stance. Now, this is particularly common in bigger riders, so if you've got larger individuals. I'm not just talking about people who are obese, I'm talking about taller riders, individuals with physiological trait known as tibial varum, which is a bowing of the tibia, super common with varying degrees of severity, dare I say it. Almost all of these traits as an individual result in a need for a wider stance. And this is something that we've been achieving either the use of pedal washers, adjustment at the cleat, or even long axle pedal systems. We actually find that our single best-selling power meter these days is our Sioma Duo She, which is an axle extension which results in a 15mm increase in the rider's stance. We've found that by bringing the feet further apart, it typically results in significantly less weight through the front of the bike. Something that is worth considering is that bicycles over the last few decades have become increasingly narrower. Some of you may remember the triple chain set. Well, we did away with that because of the added complexity, but also because it allowed us to get the feet closer together. The reason for this, it provides more clearance when you're pedaling through the bottom of the stroke when the bike's banked over in a corner. So we're designing the bikes around the needs of racing cyclists. If any of these things are ringing true, have a go at maybe adjusting your cleats. Push the cleat inboard to get your feet further apart away from the bike. Have a go experimenting with some pedal washers. See if you can get those feet further away from the bike. What you might find is that you will end up with less weight on the front of the bike. Secondly, you also probably get less pressure on the outside of your feet as well, come to think of it. Oh, and your saddle will be more comfortable too. Reason number 7, insufficient setback. When I say saddle setback, I'm talking about the horizontal placement of the saddle in space. In bike fitting, we use the bottom bracket as a reference point, so we would typically paint a line with a laser through the bottom bracket, which is what the cranks spin on, and we're talking about how far back or forward in relation to that line the saddle is. In order to get it right, it requires a certain amount of screening. By that, I'm talking about understanding a rider's mobility in their hips, namely. But secondly, you also need to take into consideration rider morphology. So individuals with a large head, individuals with more upper body mass will typically need more saddle setback to offset that weight. It will usually be carried out in conjunction with a reduction in reach and handlebar drop as well. But generally speaking, if the saddle is too far forward, it has this effect of pitching the rider into the front of the bicycle. Again, cue NUMB hands. The saddle setback should not be used as a means of reducing reach, at least not in an uninformed manner. What we quite often will see is riders riding a bike that is way too long and they'll push the saddle really far forward as a means of just reducing the reach to the handlebars. The problem with that is it's also going to disrupt weight distribution. When I say weight distribution, we usually use a reference point called BMR, which is body mass representation. In all of our bike fitting, we apply a dot to the base of the scapula represented here. And we'll typically draw a line up through the bottom bracket to get an understanding of where the weight distribution might be being distributed. Reason number 8, your saddle is too wide. Thanks to certain big American bike brands that have the obsessive attitude of measuring sit bones as a means of measuring for a saddle, that quite commonly results in a saddle that is too wide. Now, if the saddle is too wide, what will typically happen is the rider's thighs will glance the wings of the saddle here. And what that typically results in, I mean, it's human nature to get away from it, is to gravitate towards the nose. If you're sitting on the nose of the saddle, you're not going to get any amount of support for the pelvis. As a result, you end up with a hell of a lot of weight on the front of the bike. Cue NUMB hands. So if you've got this far, you've probably realized that there is a bit of a theme here. It's almost exclusively driven by excessive weight falling onto the front of the bike. When you have excessive weight on the front of the bike, it typically results in a cut-off of circulation. What this video really should be called is, why have I got too much weight on my hands? But nobody would really search that though, would they? I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope this helps with solving some of your hand numbness woes. Stick a comment in the comment section below if you think I've missed anything. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you for the next one.